Hello and welcome to this video that talks about the plant structures and their functions. Okay, so we all know that living organisms are classified into three domains. These are the bacteria, the archaea, and the eukarya. The eukarya subdivides into kingdoms. This includes the protists, the plants, fungi, and animals. And today we're concerned with the plant kingdom. All right, so now what are plants? Plants are multicellular eukaryotic organisms with cell walls made up of beta-glucose monomers. Okay, so we said that plants are multicellular eukaryotic organisms. This means that they have more than one cell, and eukaryotic distinguishes the plants from other organisms by the presence of the nucleus inside their cells. The plants are further distinguished from other organisms by the presence of cell walls, which is also distinguished by the buildup block, the monomer beta-glucose. So this is because, for example, bacteria has some certain types of bacteria have cell walls that are not made up of beta-glucose sometimes, which makes plants different from those organisms. Okay, so plants are made of two main systems, the shoot system and the root system. As you can see, the root system is made up of the primary root and the lateral root, or we sometimes call it the secondary root. And the shoot system is made up of the flowers, the leaves, the stem, and these two systems work together in order to maintain the survival of the plant. The survival of the plant includes exchanges of gases with the surroundings, movement of water and nutrients internally throughout the plant, and reproducing in the flowers. Okay, so the structures we're going to talk about today in the plants are the roots, the stems, the leaves, and the tissues in each of these structures. So we mentioned the roots briefly, and the stems have two types, the woody types and the non-woody stems. We also have the leaves, and the tissues throughout those structures are three types, the dermal tissue, the ground tissue, and the vascular tissue, which subdivides into the xylem and the phloem, which we'll focus on today specifically. Okay, so let's start with the roots. And the roots are divided into two types, the primary roots and the secondary roots. And the primary roots, those are that grows downwards. The primary roots are those that grow downwards. And the secondary roots are those which branch out to the side. And together they form the root system. Now the primary root is responsible for the anchoring of the plant firmly into the ground as it only grows downwards, firmly into the soil. While the secondary roots, which have many small branching roots, they increase the surface area for the absorption of water and minerals from the roots. Okay, so as you can see, here is the secondary and the primary roots together. And this is a cross-sectional area of the roots. We don't need to talk about it here, but let's see that there is the xylem and the phloem, which we'll talk about in a bit. Okay, so going up the plant, we have the stem. And as we said, roots are responsible for the absorption of water and minerals through the plant. And we also mentioned that roots store sugars from the leaves. Roots absorb water and minerals, okay? And sometimes roots store food materials coming from the leaves, okay? We'll talk about that in a bit. So as we said, the roots are responsible for the absorption of water and minerals through the plant. And we also mentioned that the roots store sugars from leaves. But how so? This is all because of the stem and the presence of the stem, which holds the plant upright so that they can get the sunlight and air they need. The stems also carry flowers, the leaves, and the secondary leaves, and the point at which these structures grow is called the nodes. As you can see in this picture, this is the node. where the two structures are connected, the structures are connected to the stem. So another vital function, or the main function of the stem, is to transport water and minerals and nutrients or sugars from the roots to the leaves and the other way around, and carrying food from the leaves to the rest of the plant. And without this connection between the roots and the leaves, the plant could not survive high above the ground. So let's look at the cross section of the stem. As you can see, here's the outer layer, which we call the epidermis, and then we have the middle layer, which is the cortex, and it's a spongy-like structure. And then we have the most importantly is the two tissues that are responsible for all of this transport in the stem. So we have pointing outwards is the phloem, and pointing inwards is the xylem. Now, the xylem is responsible for the transport of water and minerals from the roots to the leaves. From the roots, we have the xylem, and we have in the stem, we also have a xylem tissue, and in the leaves, we also have the xylem tissue. And it is only responsible for the transport of water and minerals. While we have the phloem, which points outwards, and this is responsible for the transport of nutrients and sugars from the leaves down to the roots. Since we have phloem and xylem in the roots, the stem, and the leaves, thus the transport is possible from those two organs. So let's talk a bit about the xylem and the phloem. As you can see here in this picture, we have the xylem is responsible, as we said, for the water and mineral transport. And we can see that there's only one way transport, one way of transport, and that is from the roots to the leaves. Now, the xylem, let's make sure that we understand this flow, easy flow of water and minerals present. No end walls means that so the tube becomes hollow, and it is easy for the water to flow easily. We should also remember that the xylem is made up of dead cells, dead lignified cells. The dead cells will allow the conduction of water and minerals. The outer cells are not living, and so this means that the cells will not have a cell membrane, neither the nucleus, neither the cytoplasm, and they are so dead, okay? So the xylem is made up of thick-walled cells that are lignified and dead. While the phloem, looking at it, you can see that there is a two-way movement, and there are end walls, and these end walls, we call them the sieve plates. These allow the selective transport of certain particles and of the nutrients and sugars. It is also made up of cells are living but need support, which means that the living cells will allow the conduction of sugars and other nutrients. However, the cells will lack any organelles other than the cell membrane, the cell wall, and the cytoplasm. And you can see that the two-way movement is because of the transport of sugars and the nutrients from the roots to the leaves, and sugars that have been formed in the leaves down to the roots. Okay, moving on, after the transport from the roots to the stem, through the stem, it all goes to the leaves. And this is the most crucial organ for the survival of all organisms, as it is the one that maintains the survival of the plant. This is because it is to be consumed by other consumers, by herbivores and omnivores. And this is all because of the process of photosynthesis. It is responsible for the survival of all those organisms because of the process of photosynthesis, which leads to the production of oxygen and sugars. So the primary role of the leaves is to collect the sunlight and make food by photosynthesis. Now, let us look at the structure of the leaves briefly. As you can see here, that first we have the upper layer, which we call the cuticle, and it's a waxy-like structure that helps, that protects the leaf from excess loss of water by transpiration. And it also helps in less burning, or the chance of burning of the surface of the leaf from hot sunlight. Then we have the upper epidermis, which contains cells. And then we have the mesophyll layer, and then the lower epidermis and a cuticle. And here the cuticle is a thinner layer than the upper cuticle. So looking at the mesophyll layer, it is made up of two types of cells, the palisade mesophyll cells and the spongy mesophyll cells. And the palisade mesophyll cells, as you can see, they are packed with cells that are rectangular shaped. And these cells contain the organelles such as the chloroplast, the vacuole, the nucleus, the cell walls, and the cell membrane, and the cytoplasm. So all the organelles that are present in a normal plant cell. We also have the spongy cells, which, as you can see, they are circular in shape, and they have a bit more spacing between the cells. Now, as you can notice, there are slight differences other than the shape between the palisade and the spongy cells. Here you can see that the palisade cell is much more packed with chlorophyll than the spongy cell. This is because the palisade cell, because it's positioned more above at the surface of the leaf, so it contains more chloroplasts and it's more packed close to each other. The cells are packed closely to each other so that they can increase the surface area of absorption of the sunlight. And the presence of more chloroplasts means more chlorophyll, which is responsible for the absorption of sunlight and thus the process of photosynthesis. The spongy cells may also carry out photosynthesis and absorb sunlight, but in a much lower rate. And thus they contain less chlorophyll numbers of chlorophyll. And then you have the lower epidermis, and lastly, the cuticle. Notice that a very important structure is responsible for the process of photosynthesis in the lower epidermis, and this is called the guard cell. A guard cell is basically a pair of cells where they can open and close in order to allow air, and specifically CO2 in and O2, oxygen, out. And this all occurs through the stoma, or it's the stomata, which is basically the space of air that goes in and out. So the guard cell opens and closes to allow carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. And as we said, all of these structures, the leaves, the stem, and the roots, they are all present in order to serve for the purpose of the process of photosynthesis. So what is the process of photosynthesis? So carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of sunlight, which is absorbed by chlorophyll, will produce sugars and oxygen. Let's look at it here and summarize briefly. So water is absorbed from the soil through the roots. It goes up the plant through the xylem, and then up the stem through the xylem, and then goes to the leaves through the xylem too. And there, the water will combine with CO2 coming from the air through the stoma or the stomata, and then they will combine inside the cells in the presence of sunlight, which is absorbed by the chlorophyll inside the chloroplasts, inside the leaves. And then these will all combine to produce oxygen, which leaves through the stoma or the stomata out into the air so that we are able to breathe oxygen. And then it produces sugars. Sugars are responsible for the growth of the plant, consumed by other organisms, humans, herbivores, animals, and sometimes extra sugar is made, and this extra sugar may go through again through the phloem in the leaves, down the stem in the phloem, towards the roots in the phloem too, and it is stored there in the roots as starch. Sometimes a stem may be able to store less amount than the roots, however, it may store sugar as starch in the stem. So this is the process of photosynthesis as a whole, and these structures that we have discussed are all responsible in order to serve for the process of photosynthesis. Thank you for joining me in this session. I'll see you next time.